I stole nuts from a squirrel and now my life is ruined. I have always thought of myself as rather intelligent. My wife says I'm on par with an average chimp or an octopus.
Octopuses are very smart.
And I am proud of this fact. I recently had the opportunity to engage in a battle of wits with a squirrel, which I thought would have been an occasion I would be able to rise to, given to my recent triumph over the dog who I tricked into thinking the ball disappeared.
Object impermanence.
But alas, we have a backyard with a nice garden that my wife designed and built. She's really proud of it and finds a lot of relaxation working on it. I work from home, and recently I've noticed that we get a daily visitor.
Who was the daily visitor, John?
A squirrel!
A squirrel in the garden? How dare it?
Who also likes to poke around and look for food. I usually see him while making breakfast. I almost thought it said, I usually see him while he's making breakfast. I'm like, damn, this squirrel crazy.
Damn, this squirrel flipping omelets.
It's like the TikToks.
Ratatouille, baby.
You know the TikToks where they have like the tiny pan?
And
like, so I usually walk by the window and watch him forage. Well, about a week ago, I saw him bury an acorn or some kind of nut.
Ooh, yeah, bury that nut.
If you catch my drift.
I catch your drift, John.
A literal nut.
Semen.
Ooh. I had this bright idea that I'd go there and put a handful of mixed nuts in there with the one that he had buried. I thought this was genius level trolling. I was so amused at my idea that the next day I even stood by the window watching him look for the spot where he had buried the nuts. And I was mumbling to myself something like, foolish squirrel, you know nothing.
Wait, I want to see what happens when the squirrel finds this buried treasure.
Also, who is like so maniacal against the poor little squirrel? This is
low key, like OP's actually doing something good for the squirrel.
Yeah, he's like giving him like a treasure trove of nuts.
This is like winning the squirrel lottery.
All the nuts in his mouth he could ever wish for. Well, anyways, the squirrel unburied his nut and he found it and apparently manifested a ton of other nuts. And the look on his face was hilarious. I mean, he was visibly shocked and quickly buried the whole stash again, then ran up the tree and sat there watching / guarding it from the other squirrels. I love how like the squirrel could be shocked.
Yeah, the squirrel's like, holy shit.
I mean, squirrels
do
have
investing?
Yes, this is compound interest of nuts. This is the Warren Buffett of squirrels over here. At this point, I was so pleased with myself that I spent the whole day cracking up at the thought of this squirrel. But then at 2 a.m., I was struck with an even more genius idea.
Does this man have a job?
Yeah, clearly his working from home is like, yeah, I worked on this special archaeological project.
I went on a dig.
Yeah, it's like the LinkedIn bio language. Like, I successfully transferred the scientific name for a nut, like a Polymus Contu, into freshly buried soil and aided and assisted in my furry coworkers' discoveries. I went outside and I buried even more nuts.
Nuts! Oh, yo, that's nuts, man.
He is packing his stash with his nuts. God! Like 3 times more than there was originally.
Okay.
This might be like
squirrel's investment has gone through the roof.
This is a dopamine overload. This squirrel might just like become a meth head over here. This is nuts. Now, I couldn't sleep the rest of the night because I was way too dang excited about this squirrel checking in on his stash again.
Again, this guy, does he have a job? How is he dedicating this much time in the middle of a night to fucking with this squirrel?
Wherever he works, he needs to be fired. I probably should have realized that work from home has truly loosened my grip on reality after 2 years.
Yes, we can see that.
Now, at this point, I find myself sitting at the window at 5 a.m. waiting for this damned squirrel to show up and just giggling to myself like, oh yeah, he's gonna totally trip out.
Bro, this guy's crazy.
Good God. The squirrel finally showed up and he started checking his hoard. The look on his face, indescribable. He was so flabbergasted by what he found that he actually had to look over both shoulders all around the yard as if to say, Are you kidding me? Is anyone else effing seeing this?
Yo, I feel like the squirrel's getting paranoid.
Yeah.
It's like, yo,
like,
I got to keep this under wraps. My whole family's going to be asking after these nuts. They're after my inheritance. I got generational squirrel wealth now.
Literally. He just sat there inspecting his hoard for like 10 or 15 minutes, frantically trying to figure out how he managed to find his newfound wealth. And in this moment, I realized that the squirrel faced the same philosophical dilemma that most lottery winners get when they incur a giant windfall of cash and no idea how to properly handle it. His anxieties became mine, and I found myself thinking I would probably not fare any better if I won millions of dollars.
Yeah, dude, it's a burden.
I think this person might be slightly overestimating the thought process of a squirrel. Eventually, the squirrel divided his stash into a few smaller piles and buried them all within a few inches of each other.
Smart. Diversify your income sources.
Within a few inches of each other?
That's not diversified enough.
Idiot! I don't know why the squirrel did this, but maybe it had something to do with the investor warning about too many eggs in one basket. He was so affixed of his hoard that he now had a hard time leaving it. I spent the rest of the day thinking about how to ratchet up the drama that was unfolding between us. Oh my God.
What is your job, sir?
Oh my God. Please stop.
His wife is like, Bill, you've been obsessing over this squirrel for months now. You've not given me or the kids any attention.
Literally.
I'm divorcing you.
Imagine.
And you're not even listening. You're still talking about the squirrel.
And then the end of the story is like, and then it was that moment I realized I'm in love with this squirrel.
Wow.
And I had to marry them. Now we live happily ever after with all the nuts.
All that nut juice.
Want. Now, this preoccupation gave way to a sort of Lovecraftian madness where all day long I experienced ghoulish, intrusive thoughts about the funniest stuff I could do with this squirrel's stash. Eventually, I concluded that I needed to end the game and level the economic playing field among the squirrel population in the most communist way I could.
Yeah, he can't have one squirrel having all the wealth.
Absolutely not. There cannot be a 1%er situation.
No, you can't have an Elon Musk squirrel.
No, absolutely not. Lest this little bastard use his resource advantage to create some evil rodent monopoly. So I went outside that night and reclaimed all of the nuts that I had given to him, but I left him the one single initial nut that he had buried. And when he came back the next day, he absolutely lost his mind. He was running all over the wooden fence, up and down the trees, searching manically for the culprit who had ripped him off. The amount of twitching and rage chirping he did was enough to disturb the nearby birds. I felt like a god, lording over the fate of the puny, mortal squirrel who had ventured into my yard. And I couldn't help but realize that if this squirrel had taken at least some of the nuts with him to another location, he could have profited greatly. But this foolish creature learned the hard way that hodl mentality does not always yield insane nut ROI.
Sell high, buy low.
Come on, get out of there before the
crash.
Squirrel FTX explodes, before FTX goes bottom under. Sometimes you ride the wave to zero and end up with an empty wallet with your fuzzy little squirrel in your hand. I, like the market, can be a capricious mistress. When I went to bed that night, I eagerly told my wife about my cruel shenanigans, and she laughed pretty hard at the story. However, the next morning when we woke up, the squirrel had absolutely devastated the garden.
Wait, the garden that the wife spent all that time
all
putting
the
together.
time, laying her soil down.
Oh my
disrupted.
Goodness. She can't be happy.
Having dug scores of holes and pulling up little flowers and plants searching for his lost little treasure. My wife is super pissed at me, and this weekend I have to fix the entire garden. And now I'm not allowed to buy any mixed nuts or interact with squirrels anymore.
Probably for the best. For your marriage's sake and also for your job's sake. Let's stay away from the squirrels.
I think he
Unless
should.
you're Mark Rober making a video about squirrels going through like magical hoops.
What about creating a squirrel economy and becoming their god?
I think it would be fun.
He could create a whole like commune of like squirrels and train them to get nuts for him to listen. And mutually live off of the
Or
nuts.
maybe he trains them to steal cash from strangers and he gives them nuts in exchange.
Interesting. I like this idea. If you think his wife is mad, check out this one where the husband loses $200,000 of his wife's money. Click here or check the link in the description.